It was one of those days I just needed to drive. No destination, no music, just the sound of the wheels on the road and a little distance between me and the mess I called my life. I had just clocked out early, again, after my manager gave me that look. The one that said, "We're not going to fire you, but we're not thrilled you're still here." I didn't care anymore. My job was a dead end. My apartment felt like a box someone forgot to unpack, and my phone hadn't buzzed in days except for spam calls. The highway stretched out like a long exhale. It was late afternoon, the sun low and lazy, painting the pavement in warm gold. That's when I saw her. A dusty red sedan pulled slightly onto the shoulder, hood popped open, steam rising. She stood off to the side, arms crossed, clearly frustrated. Or maybe just tired. A worn backpack sat by her feet, and she paced in slow, agitated circles. I passed her, slowed, cursed under my breath. Then I pulled over. I backed up slowly on the shoulder and stopped a few yards behind her. She turned sharply, phone in one hand, other shielding her eyes from the sun. "Hey," I called out as I got out. "Everything okay?" She hesitated. That look, the cautious one women get when a stranger approaches on a deserted stretch of road. I didn't blame her. "Car overheated," she said. I don't really know. My phone's at 5% and I've been stuck here for like 40 minutes. Mind if I take a look? I know a thing or two about cars. Still hesitant, she nodded. I stepped over, careful not to move too fast or get too close. She stayed by the passenger door while I leaned into the engine. It was a mess. Hoses worn, coolant low, one fan barely spinning. "Your radiator's probably done. You're not going far in this." She sighed, loud and tired. "Figures. Got someone coming." "Tow? Friend?" She shook her head. "No one close. I'm moving, actually. Was on my way to the next town to stay with a friend. Job interview tomorrow." "That's rough timing," she half laughed. "Is there ever a good time to break down in the middle of nowhere?" I smiled despite myself. Fair point. After a pause, I offered, "I can give you a ride. Just to town. There's a mechanic I know who won't rob you blind." She studied me, not answering, not rejecting. "I get it if you don't want to get in a stranger's truck," I said. "I'd be suspicious too, but I swear I'm just a guy with too much time and not enough sense to mind my own business." She chuckled at that. Then, "You got a name, stranger?" "Chris? You?" "Maya." We shook hands. It felt like some kind of quiet contract. Minutes later, she was in the passenger seat of my old pickup, windows down, wind in our faces. She kept her backpack on her lap like armor. I didn't ask questions, didn't try to fill the silence, just drove. "So, you make a habit of rescuing stranded women?" she asked finally. "Only on Tuesdays," she smiled. "Lucky me." We reached the edge of town around sunset. I took her to a small shop I trusted, and the owner, Ray, promised to look at the car in the morning. "You got a place to stay?" I asked. Supposed to be meeting my friend at her work, but she's not answering. Might have gone into the night shift. I hesitated. "There's a decent diner a block over. If you want to wait somewhere warm. Coffee's terrible, but the pie's good." She looked at me like she was deciding whether or not to keep trusting me. "Okay, but only if they have apple. Best in town." We sat across from each other in a cracked leather booth, a slice of pie between us. The lights were too bright, the jukebox stuck on old country, but it felt okay, comfortable. I learned she was moving to get away from more than just her old job, that she liked plants but killed most of them, that she hadn't cried when she left home but almost did when she saw her high school. I told her I hated my job but stayed because it paid enough to be bored, that I hadn't drawn anything in years, though I used to love it, that I hadn't had real company in a long time. And somehow, that wasn't awkward. When her friend finally texted, Maya stood up, shouldered her bag, and said, "Thanks for the ride. And the pie?" I nodded. "Any time." She paused, then added, "Seriously. If you ever need a plant killed, I'm your girl." I laughed. Then she was gone. And I sat there, looking at the empty seat across from me, wondering why it suddenly felt like something was missing I hadn't even known I needed. The next morning, I found myself checking my phone a little too often. Not for work emails, not for news alerts, but for a message that, logically, I knew wasn't coming. She didn't have my number. Still, I kept looking. I chalked it up to curiosity. Or the fact that Maya had been the first person in a long while who'd made me feel seen without trying to fix me. She asked questions like she actually wanted to hear the answers. And when she talked, it wasn't small talk. It was honest, rough-edged, and real. Ray called around noon. Maya's car was a lost cause, the radiator was cooked, transmission wasn't far behind, it wasn't worth fixing. "She's better off buying a new junker than sinking money into this one," he said. "Did you tell her that?" Tried. She didn't pick up. "You want me to leave a voicemail?" "I'll swing by," I heard myself say. "Make sure she gets the message," Ray grunted. "You always this helpful." "No," I said. "Guess I'm just bored." But that wasn't the truth. Not really. When I got to the shop, Maya was already there, sitting on the curb with a styrofoam cup of coffee and a look on her face that said she already knew the bad news. Her car was parked near the dumpster, hood still open, like it had given up mid-sentence. "Hey," I said. She looked up. Her eyes were tired, but she smiled anyway. "Let me guess. Ray sent you as the official messenger of doom?" "Something like that. He said the car's toast, and I believe it." She sipped her coffee and stared at the gravel. "I guess this town's it then, at least for a while. You could do worse. We've got a bar that plays live music on Thursdays and a bookstore that smells like cinnamon," she laughed. "You should write for the tourism board." "I'll add it to the list." There was a pause. "I can drive you around today if you want," I offered. "You mentioned a job interview." She blinked. "You serious? I've got the day off and apparently no healthy sense of boundaries." She looked at me long and hard. "Okay, but only if there's food involved I haven't eaten since that pie." "Deal." We spent the day like that. First to the interview, a local art supply store looking for a part-time manager. Maya came out an hour later looking stunned. "I think I got it," she said. She asked when I could start. That's usually a good sign. Lunch was burgers at a roadside shack with picnic tables and faded umbrellas. She talked about college classes she never finished. I talked about drawings I never showed anyone. We shared fries, then we stopped by a thrift store so she could find an extra change of clothes. She emerged in a faded denim jacket and jeans that actually fit. "Better than what I showed up in," she said, holding up her old stained hoodie. I took it and tossed it in the donation bin. "Hey, that was vintage failure." Exactly why it had to go. We both laughed. Somewhere in the middle of that day, things stopped feeling temporary. She still had no car, no apartment, and technically no job yet. But she didn't feel lost. And I didn't feel alone. As the sun started to dip again, we drove out to a hill just beyond town. It overlooked a stretch of fields and a few farmhouses. We sat on the hood of my truck, legs dangling over the edge, sipping sodas from glass bottles like teenagers. "Why'd you stop for me yesterday?" she asked suddenly. I thought about lying, about saying something clever or noble. Honestly, I don't know. I just couldn't not stop. You looked like you needed someone, and I think I needed someone to need me. She was quiet for a long beat. "Well, you were right." She didn't say more. She didn't need to. And neither did I. That night, I dropped her off at the small motel on the edge of town. As she got out, she turned back through the open door. "Thanks, Chris, for all of it." I shrugged. "You're welcome. Maybe tomorrow we can try that bookstore that smells like cinnamon." I smiled. Maybe we can. And this time, when she walked away, I didn't feel that empty ache. I felt something else. Like maybe, for the first time in a long while, my life was actually going somewhere, and maybe Maya was meant to be part of that road. The bookstore smelled like cinnamon and old paper, just like I promised. It was tucked between a flower shop and a laundromat, the kind of place you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. A brass bell chimed as we stepped inside, and Maya breathed in like she was home. "Okay," she said, smiling. "I'm officially impressed." The owner, an elderly woman with silver hair and a cardigan draped over her shoulders, nodded at us and went back to organizing a display of poetry books. The shop was quiet, cozy, with shelves that stretched a little too high and floorboards that creaked under every step. We wandered without talking for a while. Maya ran her fingers along spines, paused at covers that caught her eye. I watched her in that quiet way people do when they're trying not to admit they're watching. "I used to dream about places like this," she said finally, pulling a tattered paperback off a shelf, "where no one knew me, and I could just disappear into someone else's story." Sounds peaceful. It is, but eventually you want someone to know your story too. She looked up at me then, not dramatically, just simply. We sat on the old couch in the back corner, flipping through books we wouldn't buy, but didn't want to let go of either. At one point, her shoulder brushed mine. Neither of us moved away. Later, we walked out with 2 books and a recommendation from the owner to come back for open mic night. "You think we're poetry night people now?" Maya teased. "We're anything we want to be." She didn't laugh, but she didn't look away either. Lunch was leftover burgers from yesterday. She insisted on heating them up in the tiny microwave in the motel's front office while I scrolled through job listings on my phone. "You ever think about leaving this place?" she asked while we ate on the motel steps. "Sometimes. Then I remember I have no plan and no backup. Maybe you don't need one. Maybe you just need to want more." I didn't say anything, but her words stuck. That evening, she showed up at my place with 2 cups of gas station coffee and a stack of paint swatches. "You said you haven't painted in years," she said. "So I figured, let's make bad choices together." She laid the colors out across my kitchen table like they were treasure maps. Some were bold, reds, blues, forest green. Others were soft and neutral. Her smile dared me to care. "What exactly are we doing?" I asked. "Redecorating your soul, or, painting your walls." We picked a faded sky blue. Something about it felt right. The hardware store was closed, so we made a note to get paint the next day. Instead, we sat in my living room, half lit by the TV we weren't watching, and talked. About nothing. About everything. "What scares you the most?" she asked suddenly. I thought about it. Really thought. "Waking up one day and realizing nothing I did ever mattered." She nodded. "Yeah, that's a big one." "What about you?" She hesitated. "Letting people in, then realizing I chose wrong." I looked at her. "You didn't choose wrong this time." She didn't reply, just leaned her head against my shoulder. We stayed like that for a long time, not touching beyond that, not needing to. I don't know when I realized it, maybe during that bookstore visit, maybe earlier. But I wasn't just helping a stranger anymore, I was falling for her. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of that. The next morning started with the sound of paint cans rattling in the back of my truck. Maya had somehow convinced Ray, the mechanic, to open his cousin's hardware shop early. She stood on my porch, arms crossed, grinning like a kid on Christmas. "Rise and renovate," she said. "We've got walls to cover." So we painted. It took most of the morning, and the job wasn't pretty. There were streaks, uneven corners. Maya got a blue handprint on the back of her jeans, and I somehow stepped in the tray more than once. But by noon, the walls were sky blue, and something about my apartment felt lighter, like it had finally taken a breath. We flopped onto the couch, exhausted and laughing. "We're terrible at this," I said. "Speak for yourself. I'm an abstract genius." She had a smudge of paint on her cheek, and before I could stop myself, I reached out and wiped it away with my thumb. She didn't pull back. Our eyes met. Then the moment passed. She shifted, smiled. "So, what's next on the Chris and Maya Life renovation tour?" "Lunch. I think we've earned it." We ended up at a tiny food truck near the edge of town, parked beside an old farmer's market. Tacos wrapped in foil, eaten on a bench under a half-dead tree. Perfect. She asked about my drawings again. "You ever going to show me?" "Maybe when I remember how to draw." "Then you better start remembering. I'm not going anywhere." The way she said it, casual, certain, made something shift inside me. Not fireworks, just a quiet click, like something locking into place. Later that afternoon, I drove her back to the motel. She had a shift starting the next day at the art supply store and wanted to prep. I handed her a small bag I'd picked up on the way. Sketchbook, pencils, and one charcoal stick. She looked up at me, eyes soft. For me? Number for me. So I stopped making excuses. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, flipping through the pages of the sketchbook. It felt weird, like staring at a ghost version of myself, but I picked up the charcoal anyway. And I drew. Not something amazing, not even good, just a shape, a line, the beginning. Maya texted around midnight. Still awake? Yeah, thanks for today. That blue? It looks like possibility. So do you. I didn't send that last part, just read her message again and again until I finally slept. The next day, I met her after work. She had paint on her forearms and smelled like acrylic and sawdust. You look like an art school exploded on you. Thanks, she said deadpan. It's the look I was going for. We grabbed takeout and ate in the bed of my truck, parked by the lake just outside of town. Fireflies blinked along the shore. She pulled her legs up, wrapped her arms around her knees, and leaned against me. You know, she said quietly, this was never supposed to happen. What was? Us, me. Here. Any of this? I was running from everything, but now. I don't want to run. I put my arm around her. Then don't. Stay. She didn't answer right away, just let the silence stretch comfortable. Then she whispered, okay. It wasn't dramatic. No kiss. No music swell. Just that one word, filled with every answer I didn't know I needed. And for the first time, I wasn't thinking about how broken we were when we met. I was thinking about everything we could build from here. It wasn't official, but Maya moved in. Not all at once, just little things, a toothbrush on the sink, her jacket on the back of my chair, a plant she named Stanley in a chipped ceramic pot that somehow survived the move. Just until I find my own place, she said. Of course, I said. But I didn't take the toothbrush off the sink. We settled into something like a rhythm. Mornings with shared coffee and mismatched mugs. Evenings tangled in conversation or silence, both equally welcome. She talked about her new job and customers who didn't understand brushes. I talked about sketching again, slowly, cautiously, like someone learning how to breathe. One Saturday she came home holding a large cardboard tube and a grin that stretched ear to ear. Open it, she said, dropping it in my lap. Inside was a poster-sized print, a collage of old art school pieces, mostly black and white, abstract and chaotic. You found this? I asked, stunned. Online, she said. Apparently your old college still archives past student showcases. I searched your name. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't seen those pieces in nearly a decade. They're incredible, Chris, she said. You don't get to hide that part of you anymore. That night, I hung the print on the freshly painted wall. We stood there in silence, both staring. I didn't think anyone remembered, I murmured. Well, she said, resting her head on my shoulder, I do. It wasn't all perfect. There were quiet arguments, usually about nothing. Whose turn it was to do the dishes, whether the heater was too high or the window too open. One night, she got a text that made her go still. She left the room and stayed gone for almost an hour. When she came back, I didn't ask. I just looked at her. She nodded like she appreciated the silence more than questions. Eventually, she told me. My ex, she said. He wanted to know if I was done sulking, if I wanted to come back. I stared at her, not sure what to say. I'm not, she added. Done sulking, maybe. But I'm not going back. Ever. Then she looked at me. I just needed you to know that. That night, I drew her for the first time. Not a perfect portrait, not polished or technical. Just her, curled on the couch, hair messy, eyes soft, fingers tugging at the hem of her hoodie. She didn't know I was doing it. I didn't show her, but it's still my favorite drawing. A few weeks later, Ray offered me more hours at the garage. I turned him down. Maya raised an eyebrow when I told her. What are you going to do instead? Try being brave, I said. Maybe open that little studio I always talked about. Teach some kids, paint a little. Make less money, but maybe matter more. She didn't say anything, just walked over and kissed me. The first real kiss, no background music, no dramatic declarations, just warmth and lips and hands that trembled a little from how much it meant. After that, everything shifted. We weren't dancing around something anymore. We were in it, really in it. Some nights she'd fall asleep on the couch with my hoodie draped over her, and I'd stay up sketching her hair. Other nights we'd sit on the floor eating cereal straight from the box, laughing at some dumb commercial. One evening, while walking back from the diner, she stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. "I love you," she said, just like that. No let-in, no hesitation. I blinked, stunned, but then I smiled. "I love you too." And I did. In that unexplainable, terrifying, honest kind of way that felt like gravity. Like I had finally landed somewhere real. Somewhere along the way, the seasons began to shift. I noticed it first in the way the light fell through the windows, softer, more golden. Then in the mornings, when the air outside my truck smelled just a little like leaves and wood smoke. And Maya stayed. Not because she had to, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because this place and us had become something real. She got promoted at the art store, started leading weekend workshops, teaching kids and retirees how to mix colors and trust their instincts. I came to everyone I could, not just because I liked watching her work, though that was part of it, but because when she spoke, I saw the version of her the world never gave her space to be. Alive, bold, brave. My studio came together slowly. I rented a space near the edge of town, converted from an old bakery. It smelled faintly of yeast and turpentine, and the back wall still had shelves from the bread days. I kept them. They held jars of brushes now, coffee mugs, and one small potted plant, Stanley Jr. I hung Maya's print on the front wall, right above the door. "You're sure about that?" she asked the day I mounted it. "Absolutely. You found it. It started everything." We hosted our first joint class on a rainy Saturday. 5 people showed up, including Ray, who claimed he only came for the free snacks but left with a surprisingly good charcoal sketch of a wrench. We weren't rich. Some months were tight. Others were tighter. But we were building something, and we were together. One night, as fall settled in completely, we drove back out to the hill where we'd watched the sunset that first week. The air was crisp. Maya wrapped herself in my jacket and leaned against me, our breath forming little clouds in the fading light. "Do you ever think about the what-ifs?" she asked. "All the time. What if you hadn't stopped? What if my friend had picked up the phone that night? What if my car hadn't broken down at all? Then we'd be strangers." "Yeah, that's weird to think about. A little. But I'm glad we're not." She smiled, then pulled a small, wrinkled piece of paper from her pocket. "I found this cleaning out my bag," she said, handing it to me. It was an old receipt, coffee and pie from the diner, the day we met. "Guess I wanted to keep something from the beginning," she said. I folded it and tucked it into my wallet. "I kept something too," I said. I pulled out my sketchbook, flipped through pages until I found it, the first drawing of her, messy, honest, real. She looked at it and didn't speak for a long time. Then she leaned in and kissed me. Soft, certain. We sat in silence again, letting the wind carry the quiet. "Do you believe in fate?" she whispered. "Number, but I believe in choice, and I chose to stop that day." She took my hand, held it tight. "Then I choose to stay." And that was all there was. Not a fairy tale, not a movie ending. Just 2 people who had every reason not to find each other. And did. Not perfect, but real. And that was enough.